is the pre-lab video for Lab 2, Got Data, Exploring Data with Graphical Displays and Summaries. In this lab, we're going to use graphical displays or create graphical displays along with numerical summaries in order to analyze data, because both of those things are fundamental in allowing you to get a picture and gather information about data. So they're necessary for analyzing data. And so in this lab, some Stat 201 students were asked to participate in a survey that asked them to answer multiple questions. Results from this survey have been used to create a data set for you to analyze. And so basically, you're going to use this data set in order to create the graphical displays and the numerical summaries. Some of the concepts that we need to know in order to be successful with this lab include the concepts of variables, like how to figure out what types of variables we have. And there are two overarching types of variables, both quantitative and categorical. And so remember, your quantitative variables can be broken down into either discrete or continuous variables. Discrete variables are variables whose values represent counts, and are separate numbers. And then continuous variables are variables whose values represent measurements, and they can take on basically any value within a certain interval. Some of the graphs that are appropriate for use when you have quantitative variables include dot plots, stem and leaf plots, and histograms. When it comes to categorical variables, these are the variables that are not quantitative, right? They're any variable that is not a count or a measurement. And usually these variables fall into one of several, two or more categories. And some of the graphs for categorical variables include pie charts, bar graphs, and Pareto charts. Throughout this lab, you will be able to reference table 2.1, which is called Graphical Displays and Numerical Summaries by Variable Type. As you can see in this cutout or picture of that page, of that table, you have your type of variable, like categorical, quantitative. You may have a situation where you have one categorical variable and one quantitative variable. Two categorical variables are two quantitative variables, right? And so the variable type is in that first column. In the second column of that table, you have the graphical displays. These are the appropriate or some of the appropriate tables that are useful when you have that variable type. And then you have a numerical summary. These are the numbers that we would use in order to categorize or say something about that variable. And so you're going to reference this chart, and it's going to allow you to create the appropriate graph as well as the appropriate numerical summary whenever you get to your lab. And so the goal of this lab is to create graphs and obtain numerical summaries that are appropriate for the types of variables you have. And you'll use statistical software to create the graphs and obtain the numerical summaries. One thing about this lab is you're going to get your first introduction to what we call StatCrunch. And it's going to be a little confusing because you probably never used StatCrunch before. But what I want you to do is kind of not like think of this as a scavenger hunt, but almost like thinking of this as a scavenger hunt and you figuring out, oh, this is how I make a graph. This is what the graphing features of this software looks like. Or this is how we do a numerical summary. This is where we go to do the numerical summaries. And so there we go. What I want you to do in order to be successful on this pre-lab is to read and reference pages 9 through 11, and then continue in my stat lab by completing the pre-lab 2 quiz, which is basically the questions that follow this video in my stat lab. That's all for now. See you next time.